It's Jon Justice, and welcome to this intro to science fiction novel self-publishing podcast. Those of you who are familiar with me probably either know me through the Star Wars podcast that I do on a weekly basis, or through the radio show that I host Monday through Friday here in Minneapolis on Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130 and 103.5 FM. And if you listen to either of those things, you'll know that I'm also a first-time author. I published my first science fiction space opera in a series of what'll start off as a trilogy, and then hopefully, eventually we'll move into other books based off of this world that I've created with my first science fiction space opera book, Embark, which is available on Amazon.com in ebook, paperback, Kindle Unlimited, and audiobook, which I recorded which I narrated myself. I'll talk a little bit more about the book at the end of this particular podcast, but I've been thinking a lot since I got the book out about putting out a podcast talking about my experience in self-publishing, especially given the fact that when I started this process, I had no idea what I was doing and used podcasts to educate myself on what it means and what it takes to self-publish, all while I was in the middle of writing Embark. I received an email recently from a listener to the radio show, Craig Foss, and his email and his questions really was what I needed to do this particular podcast. I thought about sort of writing down my own questions and basically answering my own questions. I'm like, well, that's no fun. And I was thinking, boy, it'd be great if I could do like an Ask Me Anything when it comes to self-publishing and be able to give sort of my novice experience, give my novice experience in self-publishing and put it in a podcast. And maybe it could help somebody else out who is thinking about self-publishing themselves but has no idea how to start. I don't know if this is going to become a regular podcast. I know that I wanted to do this one at least and answer Craig Foss's email. For those that listen to the Star Wars podcast that I do on a weekly basis, a big part of the show every week is the listener feedback portion, and Craig's email really did provide me the opportunity to answer a bunch of questions that I felt, you know what, if somebody's heading out to go and self-publish their first science fiction novel, this is a really, really good way to start in maybe trying to help somebody who's starting out for the first time. So as I work through Craig's email and you're listening, if you have questions, if you're thinking about publishing your own book, if you've read Embark and have any questions about the book in and of itself, whether it's the story or just the process of self-publishing, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on the YouTube page. And if I decide to go ahead, if I get enough feedback, I may start to do a regular podcast just based off of individuals' questions that you may have who are thinking about entering the self-publishing world and would like to talk to somebody who is completely new at it, having just published my first book. So first off, hat tip to Craig for sending me this email, and sorry, he wrote this quite a few days ago, and I'm just now getting around to addressing it. So my apologies to Craig for taking so long. A little bit of background for those that aren't familiar with me and what I do and why I wrote the book. And I won't make this long because I know that many of you are probably going to be listening to this and you already know the story. So I've been a radio show host for 22 years. I've been a Star Wars fan since I was 5 years old. I was a fan of Star Wars before I was a fan of anything else. I'm a horrible writer. I'll just be straight up. I'm horrible with the English language. And my grammar is atrocious. It's so bad that when I was hosting a show in Tucson, Arizona, my program director and producer, who's now my co-host, Drew. It's the Justice and Drew show. I used to put up blogs on the radio station website, and they would basically just be musings about a particular news item. Drew would have to go in and rewrite the blog, fix the grammar, and try to decipher what it is that I was trying to say, the point that I was trying to make, because I write the same way that I talk. So a number of years ago, so probably about 3.5 years ago, I had this idea for a story. And what I find interesting is I think I have a lot in common with Craig, who emailed me, because he makes a comment at the very, very beginning of the email that absolutely resonates with me. But I'm such a fan of Star Wars that I wanted to know what it was like to create my own set of characters and universe the way that George Lucas did. I wanted to capture the spirit of Star Wars without copying it, because you can't do what George did. And this is what Craig says. He says, he said he wrote 2 books, and I'll give you the full details and extent of what he said, but he said, I wrote 2 books because Star Wars has killed the genre, so there's not much else to read. And I know what he's saying by that. It's just, it's very, very difficult, at least for me, it's very difficult to go and read a story, a space opera set in an alternate universe without equating it to Star Wars. Star Wars just does it so well. And that's my opinion, but it just does. And in my opinion, anything that you do that's like that gets equated to that. And so because of that, a lot of writers, myself included, you end up creating, well, prior to me writing Embark, I see a lot of writers who end up creating these stories that are based on Earth, right? They originate on Earth, because to do anything outside of Earth, you run the risk of having your story equated to George Lucas. So what I set out to do was, I had this idea for a story, and ultimately it is the movie that I would want to go to the theater and watch if it's not a Star Wars movie. You follow? So, John, what movie would you most want to see on the big screen? That's what Embark is. That's not Star Wars, because Star Wars would always be my first choice. So how do I make a story that is interesting and compelling for me? Because I don't like a lot of the sci-fi stories that originate on Earth. It's not an arrogance thing. It's just personal preference. I enjoy alien invasion books and films, but I'm just tired of hearing about them. And I love what Star Wars did, but again, you can't do that. So how do you create a fun adventure in a space opera style that originates on Earth? And that's what I set out personally to do, because like he said, Star Wars has killed the genre. I like to say George Lucas ruined it for everybody else. So I had the story in mind, and again, it really is sort of the best, it's sort of a best of film that I would want to see in a science fiction story. And it's got a number of different elements in it. I mean, you can take any one of your science fiction films that have a group of individuals like your Guardians of the Galaxy or your Serenity or even your Solo, a Star Wars story. Elements of Fast and Furious. Elements of the coming-of-age films that I grew up watching as a kid. Your movies like Say Anything, Pump Up the Volume. These are films that I loved back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? It's got a romance element to it like that. Certain elements from Fast and the Furious and the way that the vehicles work and how they can be tricked out in my book. These are all these things that I kind of pulled in to create Embark. And it all stemmed from this desire to want to go and create my own universe. And Embark is it's the tale of how we get out to the galaxy. It's not really ruining anything. It's in the description of the book, which I'll read later on in the show. I needed to write Embark to tell the stories that I really wanted to tell. And that was to get humanity out in the galaxy. But how do I do that? Well, rather than start out in the galaxy, you could easily go and do a prologue that basically says, this is what happened on Earth and why humanity is out in the galaxy. I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to tell the story of how we ended up there. What was the starting point? And that's what Embark is. I'm already into the follow-up. I'm now 40,000 plus words into the follow-up to Embark, and I hope to have it out later this year. And it's been an amazing, trying, frustrating at times, but overall completely satisfying experience in writing this book and taking on this new adventure, creating this new content, completely different than what I do on the radio. And I've learned the English language because I didn't really know it all that great before. I've learned punctuation. And in the process, I hope I've learned to be a better writer. Thankfully, Embark has done fairly well so far for a first-time published novel and the first in a series. They say that it really takes the second and third books before a series really takes off. And I'm happy to say that I've established a nice little base of readers on this first book, and a lot of that's due to the fact that a lot of people know me just because of my 22 years in radio. But it really has been a satisfying experience, and writing is hard. The writing process is difficult, and it's not even necessarily fun, but that feeling that I get, it's like a runner's high. That feeling that you get when you finish up a scene or a chapter and you walk away going, oh man, that was good. Oh, I can't wait to get the rest of it done. That's the feeling that drives me. It takes a bit of effort to sit down to the iPad or to the laptop, to the MacBook, and to start writing. And oftentimes I'll sit down and put my fingers on the keyboard and really not know which direction the story is going to go or what's exactly going to happen. Let me put it this way. I know the direction it's going to go, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. And it's not until I start typing that the inspiration starts coming, and then the story begins to form, and the dialogue begins to form, and the events begin to unfold. And what I end up writing is, and what I always default to when I'm having a difficult time and figuring out what I want to write is, well, what would I want to see? If I'm watching, and I always equate it to movies because I love movies. I'm more of a movie watcher than I am a reader. So when I write my story, I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of, okay, if I'm watching this in the theater, what's the next thing that's going to thrill me? If I can steal a line from J.J. Abrams, Star Wars director, how is, when he wrote The Force Awakens, they wanted to make a story that was going to delight. How is this going to delight me? And that's what I end up writing. Okay, so I'm going to fill in a bunch of gaps and keep rambling on. I'm already 11 minutes into the podcast, so let me go ahead and get into Craig's email and start answering some of his questions. And again, if you're listening to this, any questions that you have on self-publishing, writing, or the story that I've written in and of itself, please drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave me a comment on YouTube. So, Craig writes this. I'm a listener to your show, a fellow AMC A-list member and science fiction writer. By the way, I dig that. I'm an A-list member, and talk about good branding that AMC did, right? Because, and this all fits. Branding is important. And especially when you're writing sci-fi novels, good characters and good branding and development and ship names. These are all things that I'm really into. And the fact that Craig, for as trivial as it may be, fellow AMC A-list member, to me, that goes, you know what? AMC did a really good job. Because I go, yeah, man, we're A-list members. Boom. The guy that I do the show with, Drew, he's an A-list member, right? It feels like an exclusive club. Not unlike it is when you've got a group of fans that are all a fan of one thing, whether or not you're a fan of Star Wars or Harry Potter. Okay. I've written 2 books, nothing published. Wrote my first book a few years ago. I mainly wrote it because Star Wars has killed the genre, so there's not much to read. I went through the process of trying to get my first book published. I had one publisher send me an email saying my book was too long and that no publisher would even bother to read it. I worked hard on those 750 pages. Try editing that many pages. Anyway, my second book was much simpler and much shorter. I'm currently working through the process of editing it. I hate editing. Okay, let me stop here. He gets into a little bit of this, but first off, second book was much simpler and shorter. I don't know why that is, but it's absolutely true. It took me over 2 years to write Embark. I finished it. I finished writing the first draft, and there really was only one draft. I finished writing the first draft the day before I went on the 4th of July vacation. I think it was July 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, I pulled up my calendar. I was wrong. I finished writing it on June 29th. I remember because I got home from work that day, and I was down to the final act of the movie, the book. I was down to the final act of the book, and I wanted to get the full draft done before I started vacation because I just wanted to enjoy my summer vacation. I didn't want to have it in the background, knowing that was just part of the process. And so I spent about 7 hours hammering away on the keyboard, writing the finale to the book. And I wrapped it up, I think, like at 5:30 or something on that Friday, June 29th. And then it took from June 29th until November 5th, I think. Yeah, so it took, July, August, September, October. So it took about 5 months for me to go through the editing, and I'll explain how I did that, and then hand it off to a proofreader. And I'd already gotten the artwork done, so I'll get into more of that coming up. So it's a lengthy process at the time based off of that original draft was really, really rough. And what I did was my wife ended up being my editor. So she started editing a printed up draft by hand. And so she would go through, she's incredible with the English language and is an avid reader, which I'm not. And so what she started doing was the first quarter of the book, she had a draft copy that she did her hand corrections on, then handed back to me, and then I would go and type in the corrections into the draft in the laptop. That was taking too much time. So the system that we ended up working out was I was going through and doing my own edit. I was doing my own line by line edit, which still wasn't perfect because I'm bad at grammar. So as I was doing that, when I do my line-by-line edit, I would take the part that I edited, and then I would hand the laptop over to her, and then she would go through the line-by-line edit. She would make more corrections. She would highlight things that she thought I needed to change. She would let me know sentences that were incomplete, and then I would go and make further edits based off of what her edit was. And then I went through and did a complete line-by-line edit again, and once it was done, then I went and handed it off to a proofreader to go and proofread it. So yes, the editing process stinks, and if I can suggest anything, either find somebody you know who's an editor that you get along with, because that's a difficult process, because you can't help but have people's opinions come into play when they're editing a book. And if you're hiring somebody to edit it, that's an easier process. You can hand it over, you can pay, a couple grand, hand it over to a professional editor. They're going to take notes, they're going to give you the edit, they're going to hand it back, and then you can make the adjustments that you want to make. If you're doing that with somebody that you know or a relative, you can get into a tense situation, and my wife and I really did, but ultimately it ended up becoming a good experience for both of us. All right, so let me get back to Craig's email. I'm writing to find out your experience in getting a book published. Did you try to get a publisher to pick up your book? With your radio career, I would think a publisher might have been interested based on all of the free publicity you could generate through your show and podcast. I thought the same thing, and I was wrong. First off, there's not a lot of traditional publishers left. One of the things I learned listening to various podcasts, including almost every episode of the science fiction and the science fiction and fantasy marketing podcast, which is a great one, which you can find on YouTube or on iTunes, the Science Fiction and Marketing Podcast. Fantastic resource. And a lot of what they had mentioned was that it used to be there was a lot more traditional publishers out there, but self-publishing has really started to grab hold. And there's arguments to be made that self-publishing is the better route to go. You have more control over your content. It requires more work because you have to promote it yourself, but you actually have the opportunity to get more back in return of royalties than you do with the traditional publishing route, right? And the trade-off really comes down to you go to the traditional publishing route and you're going to have the prestige of having somebody traditionally publish your book. They're going to do a lot of the work for you in terms of promoting it, but they're going to keep a larger cut of what it is that you've of your book. They're going to keep a lot larger cut of the royalties. I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to the content that I create, whether it's the book or whether it's the radio show that I do. So I prefer the self-publishing route. I don't personally need I'm a traditional publisher. I did send it off to a couple of publishers, and I got a couple of responses back specifically from Penguin. But one thing that I've learned is that they only have limited space for so many books every year in particular genres. So it really is just a sort of a lottery of whether or not you're going to be traditionally published. And to be quite honest with you, when all's said and done, I don't even know if I would have bothered to go the traditional publishing route had somebody reached back out to me and said, hey, we want to traditionally publish your book. I may have still gone, and I probably still would have gone with the self-publishing route. All right. So, yeah, I thought that and I actually used my radio career. Hey, I've already got a built-in audience who I'm pretty sure would be interested in the book, even people that aren't interested in sci-fi. I think this would be good. And I did get a response back and just said, hey, we don't think it's a right fit for us, but, keep doing, keep on trucking on, this kind of thing. So getting back to Craig's email. I'm looking for an avenue to publish my book. I'm not looking to make money, but I'm also not looking to lose money. Okay, let me stop here. I wasn't looking to make money either. And I'm still technically not looking to make money. I will say, though, once the book is published, and I'll get into this, and you have access to all of the available data, it's hard to not obsess over selling books. I like to feel I have a bit of an advantage because I am a radio talk show host and I have a thicker skin and I don't necessarily care as much about the accolades, because I don't. But I'm human like anybody else, and so negative reviews still hurt, and selling books still means a lot. So I'm also not in it to make money, but at the same time, the desire to sell more books and to get your story out there is so great that they're coupled together, right? You want to sell more books, but because you're selling more books, you're making more money. And you run into this issue, too, of with Amazon, you can pick your price point. And you can sell your book for, say, 99 cents. You may sell a lot more books, but you're only going to get 35 cents per book. You sell your book for $2.99, you're going to get like $1.35 per book. You follow? But you may not sell as many books. Then there's the argument to say that a lot of readers don't go for 99-cent books because they figure if the book's available for 99 cents, it's not a very good book, so they don't want to bother reading it. And this is the game that you end up playing when you get into this. So keep that in mind if you're going to self-publish. Just be prepared to deal with and to dig deep when it comes to, this is what I want to accomplish, and I'm not going to let these things get to me. Because Amazon, it's a lot like gambling. If you've been to Vegas and you gamble, and I think Amazon designs it this way. They give you access to so much data, whether it's the number of books that you sell, whether it's the various, there's like probably 15 different rankings I can look at on any given moment, and that can show me how well the book is doing in different genres. I can see how many books that I sell every single day. I can see how many page reads on Kindle Unlimited that I'm getting. And that's where sort of the gambling equation comes in, because, okay, well, if I set up an AMS ad and I spend this much money, maybe I'll get this much money back. And even if I don't get this much money back, I can see that I've went and sold this many books. And so maybe that's really what it is. You just be mentally prepared. Set yourself your own goals. Don't put your expectations too high, and keep reminding yourself of what those goals are. If they are to sell a bunch of books and make a lot of money, keep your expectations real and know that you're going to have to spend quite a bit of money to make money. And I know that I'm hitting on like a lot of things that, a lot of different terminology or details that you might be scratching your head going, what in the world are you talking about? And these might be things that I address in other podcasts. AMS ads, those are Amazon ads. You can buy ads on Amazon, and there's all kinds of different options that you have for the types of ads that you want to run. Then you get into, okay, I'm going to run this ad. What is the description of the book going to be based off of the number of characters that Amazon allows for this particular ad? Then you have to get into, on your publishing page on Amazon, what is the description of your book? Is your description of your book something that people are going to want to buy? Does it need to be different than the book blurb on the back? This is a very lengthy trial and error process that I've gone through. There are keywords that you have to choose, that you're able to choose. And the keywords are basically like if you've got a book in a bookstore, these are the categories people would go and find your book. So where do you want people to find your book? Science fiction? Okay. What type of science fiction? Is it hard sci-fi? Is it fantasy science fiction? Is it space opera, space exploration? I mean, the possibilities are limitless. And it really is a trial and error process to find the right combination of keywords, book descriptions, ad purchases, placement of where the ads are to bring about a consistent number of sales. Okay. Let me get back to Craig's email here. Ideally, I would like to find a website that allows authors to post their books, maybe a chapter at a time, and give feedback on them. From my experience, I can say that I have no idea if my books are good or bad. I do not know if they are suspenseful or the characters are interesting or boring, and that is why a website that allows authors to post would be useful to get them neutral feedback. Friends and family members do not usually want to criticize, and the criticism is needed in order to improve the book. Let me provide an alternate view on that, because I'll be straight up honest. I would not want to go that route. Okay. Why would I not want to go that route? I don't want to go that route because, in my opinion, you don't want to necessarily, and this is going to go against what a lot of people believe, but that's just my philosophy. You don't necessarily want to write what you think the readers want to read. Okay. You do want to write to genre. People do have expectations in certain genres, right? Mystery, drama, science fiction, young adult, right? There are certain tropes in storytelling. I treated the writing of Embark and the follow-up based off of what I would want to read. Okay. And I did that because I used the same philosophy that I use for my radio show. For the radio show, I only talk about the stories that I want to talk about. Okay. It's a little bit different because Drew and I share time and we do stories, we both choose stories for the show. But, ultimately we're choosing, if he's picked a story that I'm not necessarily interested in covering, I will hand it off to him and let him run with it on the show. Because he's going to provide the most interesting take on it because he's the most passionate of the two of us about that story. I hosted my own radio show for 9 years in Tucson. And with my own radio show, I didn't cover any stories that I didn't want to talk about, even if it was huge, big news of the day. No, 9 times out of 10, big, huge news of the day I'm going to want to talk about, be that as it may. Why would I want to go on the air and try to sound interested in a story I'm not interested in? No. Be as authentic and as genuine as you can possibly be, and you'll reach the largest audience you're capable of reaching. It's a little bit different when you're writing for genre, because you got to stay in that genre. But my point is, I would not allow, and I've even thought about this in the follow-up book, and I'm not going to do it. I would not allow independent people into my story until I'm done with it. When you're done with it, that's a different ballgame. Write the story that you want to write. Write the story that's most interesting to you, because that's going to be your best content. If you get halfway through a story and then somebody starts picking it apart and you start second-guessing yourself, you're going to be second-guessing yourself through the whole process. And I don't think you want to do that. What you want to do is you want to write what you're most passionate about, what interests you the most, because you're going to put the best effort into it. You're going to write the best material that you're capable of writing that way. Now, once you're done writing, that's when you need to find a group of independent beta readers to read your book and give you honest feedback. Now, I did that, and I'm going to do it again on the second book. I ended up making a mistake because I chose about 10 people, and I only got full feedback for a few of them because I made the mistake of not giving everybody a timeline. I had some people that were interested in being beta readers, but I don't think that they were regular readers. And this isn't a dig on any of those individuals that they happen to listen to this particular podcast. I'm not mad about anything with anybody. I ended up getting exactly what I needed to get from the handful of people that did get back to me in the time frame that I needed. But what you need to do is you need to find a group of individuals who can be your beta readers, right? And you can find them independently, or you can find people that you know. You send them the book. And what I did was, if you go online and you just search for, beta reader best practices, I found one particular website that laid out like 18 questions. And basically said, these are the questions you want to ask your beta readers. And they were very, very specific. They were specific to story and to character and character development and details and things like that. They asked the relevant questions that you as an author need to know before you go and publish your book. Then you get the feedback from those individuals. And then you can go and make the adjustments to your book as you see fit. Are there common themes that everybody is pointing out that you need to go and change? And I'll tell you what, this is a true story. I finished the book, I got it out, and it was only after I got the book released that I had a couple of people that pointed out to a couple of very specific things. Universally, well, not universally, criticism-wise, positive criticism, still criticism. I've had a number of people say the book starts off slow, but once it gets going, it takes off. Doesn't surprise me at all, because the whole first quarter of the book is really the setup to the rest of the story, and that's really when it really takes off. The first quarter of the book is also my first foray into writing ever, so it's probably going to be a little bit wonky. I found that out after I wrote the book. I think in retrospect, if I got that information beforehand, I probably would have made a few adjustments. I also found out in retrospect that there was and this didn't bother anybody, but this bothered a few people. There's a common theme throughout the book. And for those that have read it, you'll know what it is. If you haven't and you go pick it up, I don't want to ruin it for you. But there's a common theme throughout the book. And I had a couple of people that complained that a certain thing was repeated too often. And I've had other people that say it didn't bother them at all. They completely understood why it was. In retrospect, if I had known that ahead of time, I probably would have made a change. Okay. And that was really just because the beta readers that I had didn't have any issue with those particular things. But I'm also going to allow for enough time for more than just 2 or 3 beta readers to get back to me to give me a full layout of the next book, so that I could avoid that again. And I don't even know if I would have necessarily changed anything, because I went back and read the book again based off of some of those suggestions, and I kind of went, well, every single circumstance where that particular thing pops up, it's relevant. But I also wrote the book, so I can say that. So, again, my advice to you would be write the book that you want to write, and then give it to beta readers, and you can give it to friends or family members who you know are going to be honest with you, and then give them a timeline and a set of instructions on what it is you're looking for, and then see what they have to say once the book is done, and then make the adjustments you need to make. But I would not advise to allowing people into the story prior to when it's finished. That's just my personal suggestion. All right, Craig comes back. Regarding your self-publishing, was it expensive? I plan to look at Amazon for my second book. Do they require you to buy a certain amount of books? Again, I'm just looking for some place to post. Okay, I'm not interested in making my friends and family buy the book that they do not want. I'm wondering if you looked at publishing on iBooks. Okay, so self-publishing was not expensive in terms of self-publishing the book in and of itself. You can go 2 different routes. I'll talk to you about the things that did cost me money here in a moment. But you can go two different routes. You can go the route of publishing wide. If you're going to self-publish, publishing wide, which means that you're going to put your book out on all the available platforms that are out there. Amazon takes up 80 to 85% of the self-publishing market. Then you've got Kobo, which is out of Canada. You've got Barnes and Noble. There's a number of different other places where you can go and publish your book, and there are entities out there that do it all for you. So you can use Smashwords or Draft to Digital. These are places that you can put your book up in one spot, and they will put it out wide to all the different locations, including Amazon. Or you can go Amazon exclusive and do KDP Select. I did KDP Select. KDP Select is free. You can publish your ebook, your paperback. Once you get through, if you do an audiobook, you can publish through Audible, ACX, Audible, and they'll put it up on Amazon as well. If you go to Amazon.com, Jon, Jon Justice, search for Embark, you'll see the ebook, the paperback, and the audiobook all there. Plus, you have your book available on Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited is where readers pay a monthly fee, and they can read as many books as they want for free. Amazon tracks the number of page reads, and you get paid royalties based off page reads. They have their own standard at which they will go and determine how many page reads equals a full book and the royalty you get off that. So, for example, my book is 511 pages. KENP, that is the term that you use for the Kindle Unlimited reads, okay? So KENP, they calculate that my book at 756 page reads is the book being read. So for every 756 page reads that I get on KENP that they track, I get credit for the book. So, which is usually about equivalent to the royalty that you get off the ebook, which is probably like $1.35, $1.50 for every 756 pages read. So I went that route because I really like that idea, and so far it's paid off. And because Amazon corners so much of the market, you have the ability to get your book out there in front of more people, in my opinion, because you have people that are going to be more willing to read your book because they're paying the monthly fee on Kindle Unlimited and they're reading it for free. So you have the opportunity to put your book in front of more eyes, which gets more people talking about it, okay? I do see the benefit of publishing wide, and I may do that in the future. Amazon requires you to sign up for KDP Select for 90-day intervals, and you can't back out of it for those 90 days. I just passed my first 90-day interval for the book just a week ago. And I went ahead and re-upped because I like what it's done so far. I will say that it's a little bit weird because my page reads per day has dropped considerably since I re-upped with the KDP Select. I also know that a lot of people, because it's glitchy, Amazon gets backlogged sometimes in their reporting. And so you don't necessarily see all the data right up front, and sometimes it takes a few days for it to catch up. So that's a little bit frustrating. I'm going to go through this next 90 days, and then I may drop, depending on what my page reads continue to be on Kindle Unlimited. I may drop Kindle Unlimited and publish wide and see what happens when I get my book out in other places like Kobo and like Barnes and Noble. But right now, I really like what KDP Select has to offer, and it's all free. And then they pay you like on a rolling month average. So I released the book in November, and I got my first royalty money worldwide at the very beginning of the month of February. Okay. So getting back to Craig's email, it wasn't expensive because it was free to go and sign up. The expense came into the editing process, the proofreading, and the cover art. I went with a guy who does a lot of space opera, science fiction novel cover art. His name is Tom Edwards, and he did just a fantastic job on my cover. His website is tomedwardsdesign.com, and I told him what I wanted for a cover, and I gave him some descriptions from the book, a scene that I wanted to depict. And if you've been on any of my social networking, or even the picture for this video, that's the cover for Embark. And it really was exactly what I was looking for. He designed the ships based off of my descriptions. He was incredibly easy and flexible to work with. Between that, which cost me, oh gosh, how much did that cost me? Well, I'll tell you what. Let me go this route. Rather than telling you individually what everything cost me, I'll give you the total amount of what it all cost me to publish completely. Just the editing and the book. So between getting the book cover done, and he gave me everything I needed. I got the book cover. I got the ebook cover. I got artwork for Facebook and for Twitter. I got desktop wallpaper. It all came with a complete package. And then I went with a proofreader, Angela Wallace, who did a fantastic job. There's still a few mistakes in the book, but that's partly my fault because I needed to go through the book one last time before I put it out there, and I did, but I missed a few things. So again, lessons learned. So there's a couple of mistakes still in the book, which is unfortunate, but it happens. Thankfully, readers are way more forgiving than I could have ever expected. So between Angela and Tom Edwards with the cover, I spent about $1,800 total. Less than $2,000 to do all that. And I've done a really good job of recouping that. Let me put it that way. That's not the same for everybody. I have a huge advantage because people do know who I am, and I knew that writing the book. that there was going to be, the audience that I had built in 9 years in Tucson and the audience in the 3 years that I've built here, and just my radio, 22 years in radio. I really had a huge advantage in selling the book because of people who are interested simply because it was written by Jon Justice. I know that's not the case for everybody. And from everything that I've been told, it takes a couple of books in a series, like I said earlier, before it takes off. And people really want to go buy the books, especially when you got what they call whale readers. I guess a lot of whale readers, voracious readers who read all the time. A lot of times they don't want to pick up the first book in the series because they want to be able to immediately go and read the follow-up book, so they'd rather wait till the next one is out. I'm trying to get the follow-up book done so that it's out before a year goes by. So I'm not rushing. The second book is a lot easier to write, as Craig said. I don't know why that is. It just really is. I feel like I'm heading to the halfway mark, and I really haven't been. I just do a little bit of writing every single day in order to do that. And so I'm really hoping to get this book out within the next 5 months at least. Hoping to have it out over the summertime. Let's see. I did not look at publishing on iBooks. My final question, as someone who has gone through the publishing process, what would you recommend I do, and what should I avoid? Thank you for your time, and good luck with the book, Craig. I like what Amazon has done. I like KDP Select as a start, especially if you're like Craig and he says he's not looking to make money. He just wants to get it out there. Amazon's a good place to start because it gives you a really good opportunity with the Kindle Unlimited to get the book out in front of other eyes, right? Especially if you're not a known name, then having your book available in a particular place essentially for free that you're still getting paid for is a really good opportunity. Advice on what you should avoid. I have been told make sure you have a good cover for your book. And there's a lot of different philosophies out there on what covers for books should look like. I know for me personally, I'm just going to be a snob about it. I know what I like. I don't know if the approach that I took for my book is the right one. Just to put spaceships and a scene on there. A lot of people say you need to have a character on there. I know covers for books that I look at and I do not like. And I know that based off of cover, especially for science fiction books, I'm really particular about that. If I look at a cover of the book and I see a certain ship design that's too reminiscent of something else that I've seen or just doesn't pique my interest, or if the title doesn't, it's like seeing a trailer for a movie that you're not interested in seeing. So the cover that I did was something that I know that I liked. And I haven't heard anybody complain about it. The only real complaint that I heard was somebody who isn't a science fiction reader who said that the cover looks like a video game. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of okay with that. So make sure that you think about what the cover is going to be. And again, I use the philosophy, or I would share the philosophy that I have of do the cover that you think looks good, that you like, right? And that may be the wrong advice, but that's just what I go off of. Because this is my baby. This is my content that I created. And so I want to put out there what I think looks good. And I think that's the most genuine sort of assessment of that. Don't do your own cover. I hear that from everybody, and I never in a million years would go and make my own cover. There's also stock covers. You can go and look at websites that have pre-made covers. Some of those are okay. If you're looking to save some money, you can usually pick those up for like $250. I was eyeing a few stock covers before I went with Tom Edwards. But ultimately, I'm super happy that I went with him because I was able to get some very specific ship designs that I was looking for. And also some designs that I wasn't looking for. The enemy fighter, the D-Corp fighter, I really didn't do a good description of it in the book. I just really didn't do a description in the book. I kind of left it vague. And he came up with a really spectacular design that I absolutely love. So I'm really glad that I went with him. But I was looking at some pre-made covers as well. What you should avoid, and it's what I mentioned before. Once you get the book out there, keep your expectations super low, and be satisfied in knowing that you created something and you put it out there. And if you want to continue writing, also understand that it may take a couple books. I've listened to a lot of podcasts from a lot of different people who said that they only sold like 12 books in their first year or only made like $45. And now they are full-time writers, having put their second and third books out in a series. That's a story that I've heard over and over and over again. I am incredibly blessed to be able to have a name that is relatively well known to where, I'm able to sell 1,000 some odd copies of my first book. I know that I did that off of my name. Thankfully, the book has been received well enough that I've got, I've got 26 reviews. Reviews are really important, and they're all mostly positive. Of those 26 reviews, there's only one that's horrible, and then sort of 3 that are meh. Everything else is all good, and I'll absolutely take it. So, just keep your expectations in check, and just go do it. Look, if you've got 2 books written and nothing published, and you've got a book that's sitting there, and, it's 750 pages long, but it's done and it's edited and you think it's in solid shape, put it out there, right? Put it out there and see what the response is. You never know. And then learn from that experience. And if you want to keep doing the writing, then, put the next one out there. I'm going to continue doing this. When I set out to go and write this book, my intention wasn't to become a regular writer. My intention was just to write this one book and say that I wrote a book. That's really what it was. It was, what would it, what if I went and wrote a book and shocked all my friends because they know I don't read? The biggest complaint that I hear from people is, you're a horrible writer. What if I went and wrote a novel and published it? How cool would that be? I never had any intention of writing I never had any intention when I started the story of writing more books. I got halfway through the story and I went, oh man, I'm really enjoying this. I had other stories in mind, but I didn't think I'd ever go and write them. And now I'm into the second book, and I can't wait to write the third and finish off the trilogy. And I already have stories in mind for the rest of within this universe that I want to go and play with. So, Craig, I hope that answers your questions. Please drop me another email. I know you emailed to my work, to justice@iheartradio.com, but write me at talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean. That's where you can find the podcast at. I'm on Twitter, Jon Justice, and The My Nerd World on Instagram, The Jon Justice. And you can also find My Nerd World on YouTube as well, where this video will be posted. Before I wrap things up, I just want to take a moment and just promote my book. Right now, it's available $2.99 for the ebook, free on Kindle Unlimited, $13.99 for the paperback. I'll tell you what, there's nothing like the thrill of going to Amazon and looking at the daily sales and seeing they're yellow. There's gray lines for paperbacks and yellow lines for are basically orange bars for ebook sales. And I'll tell you what, man, it is a thrill to go in there and to see books sold. Not because for me, not the money-making part of it, but just like, oh, somebody else purchased the book. Somebody else is getting exposed to these characters in the story, and somebody else may be going for a really fun ride based off of characters that I created. That is so thrilling. So I hope that if you've just become familiar with the book and you're listening to this podcast for the first time, I will tell you that if you haven't published before, maybe I'll cover this in a subsequent podcast. It is really hard to sell books. It's hard to get somebody to go to the website to click. And even when you get somebody to go to the website, it's hard to get them to go and purchase the book. It takes a lot. It's not easy to do. I've run Facebook ads. I still run AMS ads, and I can see the data. And it's not just the nature of the book either, right? Even if you've written a really, really good book, it's just very difficult to get somebody to go and purchase a book. So I hope that if you've listened to this and you're thinking of self-publishing, and if you're a sci-fi fan, if you're a Star Wars fan, I really do think you'll love Embark. And I'll just be straight up honest. Stop what you're doing right now. Go online to Amazon.com. Search for Embark, EMBARK, Jon, Jon Justice. If not, you get a bunch of dog products. But you search Embark, Jon Justice. Pick up the ebook or the paperback or the audiobook, which is 12 hours long, for yourself. Right now, the audiobook, if you purchase the ebook for $2.99, you can get the audiobook for like $7.50. Free with an Audible trial. Otherwise, it's like $24, I think, is the standard price on that. And again, the paperback is $13.99. And for those that aren't familiar, I'll give you the quick description of the book itself. In the not-so-distant future, flight culture has replaced car culture. Two of Earth's largest corporations now supply the planet with the technology and fuel to make air and space flight available to everyone. Taft Guardia spends his weekends at an abandoned flying field, racing through the skies with his three best friends and the girl he longs to be with, Keitha Morrow. After receiving a mysterious message from her deceased NASA scientist father, Keitha and Taft make a shocking discovery. With Earth now suddenly facing a great disaster, a ruthless and power-hungry enemy emerges. Unwittingly, Taft, Keitha, and their friends are thrust into the middle of humanity's fight for survival and future among the stars. Embark, the first book in a new series by Jon Justice Lo Giudice. In this book that I wrote, by the way, it's written as an adult, but it's also great for kids as well. My son is 12 years old. He is 12 years old. He's read it and loved it. My dad is in his 70s. He's read it and loved it. Women and men and children of all ages have really enjoyed it. I wrote it to appeal to both adults and kids. It does have a romance, but it's a sweet romance that is absolutely kid safe. One of the biggest thrills that I've had so far is one of my son Kyle's friends came up to me. We went to the movies. He came over. He goes, "Man, I love the book. I can't put it down. Oh my gosh." And he's doing all this speculating about the story and the characters and giving me his ideas of what he thinks is going to happen because he's only halfway through it. And I can't tell you what a thrill that is. So go online, again, Amazon.com. Pick up the book for yourself or purchase it for somebody else. And again, if you're a science fiction and Star Wars fan, I really, really think that you'll enjoy it. Now, with all that being said, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. If you think I should continue doing this particular podcast, please, it's going to be up to you. Drop me a comment on YouTube or send me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, if you have any other questions, whether it's about the book itself, Embark, or more specifically about self-publishing. Any questions you want to ask, and based off your response, I may go ahead and start doing a semi-regular self-publishing podcast. So thank you so much for taking time out. And again, to Craig, sorry it took me so long to go and respond to your email, but I hope I answered all your questions, and certainly if you have more, drop me an email. By the way, the music you heard at the beginning and the end of this podcast is the intro and outro for the narration for the audiobook, and I went to a website that offers music by artists that's free. No licensing fees. This was free music that... This is set Unimon, and the first one was Graham Makes Arctic Orchestral Cue. They offer it up for free, so go there and check it out. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and check out the Star Wars podcast as well. Have a great one. Bye.